Chair.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the licensing panel hearing this afternoon. This meeting has been webcast and recorded, so just to confirm that. And we'll start with a round of introductions. My name's Amanda Pinnock. I'm the chair. Councillor Homewood?
Yeah, I'm Councillor James Homewood. I'm a member of the panel.
Councillor Watson?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Watson. I am a councillor for Denby Dale Ward.
Thank you. The council's legal representative?
Good afternoon. I'm David Stickley. I'm a solicitor working for the council. I'm here to give any legal advice the panel may require.
Licensing officer?
Good afternoon. I'm Roxana Javed, and I will be presenting the report to the chair and the members.
Thank you. The applicants from West Yorkshire Police?
Good afternoon. Yes, it's PC Jagger, licensing officer for Kirklees.
And Mr. Woodhead, you with us?
No, he's not with us this week. It's just myself.
Thank you. Thank you for confirming that. OK, we'll move over to the representatives for the premises then. So, Mr. Falston, are you with us?
Yes, I am. John Falston and Jane Drury from the Woodman at Batley Car, Dewsbury.
Lovely, thank you. Is Miss Drury with you?
She is, yeah.
Lovely, OK, all right. So, Mr. Jepson from the brewery?
Yes, I'm Simon Jepson, Operations Manager for Tadcaster Pub Company.
Thank you. Mr. Bracco, legal representative?
Robert Brackett, solicitor for Tadcaster Pub Company.
Thank you. And then we have officers from the Environmental Health. Can you identify yourself?
Yes, Jenny Deneen, Senior Environmental Health Officer in the Health and Safety team.
And Andrew Robinson, Senior Technical Officer for the Pollution team.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll start by going through the formal agenda very briefly. So minutes of the previous meeting that was held on the 7th of December. I think I was the only one here out of my two colleagues, so I can approve those minutes. Any interest to declare, Councillor Homewood?
None, Chair.
Councillor Watson?
No, nothing.
Lovely. Agenda item 3 is about admission of the public. And under this section, just to make it clear that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public will be excluded from a part of the meeting while consideration is given to exempt information in relation to item 6. This is on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined under Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Once the panel has considered this information, the hearing will then move back to the public session. OK, so item 4, any deputations or petitions?
None received, Chair.
Any questions from members of the public? No? OK.
None received.
Lovely. So we'll go straight into the application then. So this application is for review hearing under section 51 of the Licensing Act 2003 in respect of the Woodman Inn, situated at 6A Hartley Street in Dewsbury. Can I begin by asking the licensing officer please to outline the application?
Thank you, Chair. As you've just said, it is a review application hearing under section 51 for the Woodman, Hartley Street, Dewsbury. On the 18th of January 2021, West Yorkshire Police made an application for the review of the premises licence under section 51 of the Licensing Act. The applicant believes that the following licensing objectives are not being met: prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the protection of children from harm. Chair, the Secretary of State guidance regarding these objectives is also attached to Appendix B should you wish to refer to them. Full details of the grounds of the review are contained in the attached review application at Appendix A. The grounds of the review are that there have been incidents of criminal offences underage drinking and COVID breaches at the Woodman within the past 18 months. The COVID breaches took place at the time all the public houses in Kirklees were closed due to lockdown. On 10th of January 2021, West Yorkshire Police received information that there were people in the Woodman watching the Leeds match, officers from West Yorkshire Police attended and found the public house had 11 people present, 5 of whom did not live at their address, and with no individual wearing PPE or social distancing. All persons received COVID warnings. West Yorkshire Police have submitted all the findings in the review application, which also include statements from police officers. These can be seen at Appendix A. Body cam footage has been submitted, which clearly indicates that COVID-19 breaches have taken place on the above dates, and this will be reviewed later on in the hearing. The designated premises supervisor has submitted 3 character references in support of their case, and these are Appendix B. The current premises licence was issued on 24th of November 2005, which are Appendix C. Consultation has taken place in accordance with the requirements under the Licensing Act 2003. Environmental Health, being a responsible authority, had visited the premises and witnessed COVID-19 breach. Attached are emails and COVID-19 breach letter sent to the designated supervisor. These can be seen in Appendix E. In order to make your decision, Chair, when determining the review application, members having regard to the information in the application may take any of the following steps as they consider appropriate. Modify the conditions of the premises licence, exclude a licensable activity, remove the designated premises supervisor, suspend the licence for a period not exceeding 3 months, revoke the licence. And Chair, I'm going to hand it back to you. Members are here to determine the application.
Thank you. So we're on to any questions for the licensing officer. I have one question. Under the premises license, what's the situation in respect of children? Is access to children restricted or prohibited in any way under the licence?
Chair, that will be one of the conditions which I can have a look and come back to you. I can go back on the licence and check it out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions from my colleagues? Councillor Homewood?
Not at this stage, no.
Councillor Watson?
No, nothing at this point.
Thank you. Any questions from West Yorkshire Police, although it's your application?
Not this time, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Anything from the representatives? Mr. Fulston? Ms. Drury?
No, not at this time.
No, not at this time.
Mr. Jepson?
No, not at this time.
And Mr. Brackup?
Nothing at the moment.
Thank you. We'll move swiftly on then to the application by West Yorkshire Police. So can I invite the officer to outline the application, please?
Thank you. Are you wanting the camera on for this part, Chair?
Yes, please.
Right. Okay, PC Katie Jagger, licensing officer. The application to review relates to the following licensing objectives: the prevention of public nuisance, public safety, protection of children from harm. There have been incidents of criminal offences, underage drinking and COVID breaches at the Woodman Inn, all within the last 18 months. The latest being a breach of COVID-19 legislation, where 5 persons were found by the police drinking alcohol in the premises, in addition to 6 family members who live at the address. At the time, all public houses in Kirklees were closed due to being in lockdown. The Woodman Inn was reported to West Yorkshire Police Licensing in November 2019 by a concerned police officer who had attended an assault on the 15th of November, there is a change, it is the 15th of November 2019, and saw what they believed to be a number of under 18s drinking alcohol at the location. The report on the police systems was 15th November 2019, Section 18, grievous bodily harm, location, the outside drinking area at the rear of the Woodman Inn. The complainant was a 16-year-old who, as a result of the assault, sustained injuries to their face, including a broken jaw. They required surgery, a metal plate and stitches. The defendant, a 17-year-old, who had also been inside the Woodman Inn. On the MG5 of the police file, it states the landlord refused to assist police with inquiries. At the point of submitting this review, this matter is still listed at Crown Court. I did check yesterday and it still has not been heard at Crown Court. The 3 witnesses who gave statements to the police were all 17 at the time of the offence. The complainant in their statement, the complainant in their statement to police states, "I met friends at the Woodman Inn, we had a few beers and chatted in the sports room." As a result of this serious assault taking place at the Woodman Inn, I arranged a meeting with the designated premises supervisor on the 21st of November 2019. Also present was Richard Woodhead from West Yorkshire Police Licensing and the partner of the DPS. In this meeting, the DPS admitted that he had been having serious issues on a Friday evening with young people wishing to enter the bar. The DPS stated that they had checked IDs, but then went on to say that persons had been known to get in the bar via the rear door whilst they were stood at the front of the pub. I advised the DPS not to allow any person under 21 into the bar on a Friday night and to employ extra staff to help them turn persons away. I recommended SIA registered door staff, but the DPS said he would deal with the situation himself. Police log 1660 of the 24th of the 12/19 at 23:01 hours refers to a public order incident at the Woodman Inn, Hartley Street, Dewsbury. The caller reported ongoing public order outside the Woodman Inn in the car park. Group of 100 plus involved, fighting and brick throwing. The caller is safe inside and the pub. The landlord and landlady are outside trying to sort it out. Mixture of ages from 17 years upwards. A further call at 23:05 hours reporting a very large group of mostly males fighting, throwing glass bottles. Approximately 50 people fighting in the middle of the road. One male has a crowbar. Caller heard one male shout, "Put your knives away." Caller saw a male with a cut to his head. When police arrived at 23:08 hours, the police log states they witnessed approximately 20 people running away from Hartley Street. A number of people were at the location, but no one was saying they had been assaulted or wished to make a complaint. A lot of people were still outside, but it was believed that those who had been fighting had made off. No further police action took place at the time, but an attending officer did email me stating a number, if not most of the people that was in the area and hanging around the pub all looked to be underage. As a result of the above incident, I attended the Woodman in company with Richard Woodhead. The DPS was questioned about this call to the police. He stated that at 11 p.m. a group of approximately 30 youths came from a pub called the Poacher on Dewsbury Road. They wanted to get inside his pub, but he would not allow this. As a result, they picked up stones and barriers and started to throw them. Due to there being no complainants willing to come forward or witnesses, I had to accept this explanation. I did have my concerns though. Once again, I outlined to the DPS that he must have a strict ID policy and not serve anyone or allow any person under 18 to drink alcohol in the premises. I asked if he would like assistance from the police on a Friday night dealing with any under 18s, but he declined this offer and said he did not need assistance. I did tell him that West Yorkshire Police would be attending the pub on a Friday evening to carry out licensing visits. Police licensing visit on the 24th of January 2020 at 21:20 hours. I attended in full uniform in company with officers from the neighbourhood policing team to carry out licensing visits to the Woodman Inn. In the side room where the pool table is situated was approximately 25 people who all looked to be under 21. On checking their identities, 4 of the people present were found to be under 18. One who was 17 admitted to having drunk alcohol, and another 3 who were all 16 years looked to be in drink. They were not with an appropriate adult and were concerned I was going to tell their parents. It was obvious their parents did not know where they were. On this evening, the DPS and his partner stated that the persons under 18 were not drinking. I disputed this and stated the facts would be reported to the licensing manager, Russell Williams. A meeting was held at Kirklees licensing on the 18th of Feb 2020. Present was Richard Woodhead, licensing deputy manager Stephanie Mashinter, myself, the DPS and the DPS's partner. At the meeting, we discussed the assault on the 16-year-old on the 21st of November 2019, the disorder outside the pub on the 24th of December 2019, the licensing visit carried out by myself and the MPT on the 24th of January 2020. The following was agreed and formalised in an action plan. No under 18s will be allowed into the premises after 19:30 hours. All persons in the premises under the age of 21 must have with them a valid identification, this being a passport, photo card, provisional or full driving licence, military ID. A member of staff will be on the door between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. on a Friday night for the next 6 weeks. This member of staff must be firm and not allow any person's entrance to the premises if they are under 21 and have no form of identification. They were told further licensing visits would be carried out, and if the above agreed conditions were not adhered to, then the next course of action would be an alcohol licence hearing. A letter was sent to the DPS and his partner after the meeting and can be produced as Exhibit KJJ1. Due to the increase of COVID-19 and the resulting closure of all public houses from midnight on the 20th of March 2019, no further licensing visits were carried out. On the 11th of May 2020, West Yorkshire Police were called to the Woodman Inn for a reported COVID breach. At 11:34 hours, officers found a member of the DPS's family had been given a haircut inside the pub by one of their friends, who did not live at the address. Both were given COVID warnings as this was a breach of the COVID-19 regulations. Licensed premises were then allowed to open on the 14th of July 2020. And then on the 17th of October 2020, a 16-year-old reported being assaulted at the Woodman Inn, West Yorkshire Police. Occurrence 13200521242 refers. The MO of the occurrences: victim and suspects are acquaintances. They have attended at the Woodman Inn and one of the suspects has been flirting with the victim during the evening, and when they found out that his girlfriend had walked away from the second suspect who was with the first suspect, had thrown Red Bull towards the victim friend, resulting in it landing on the victim's hand. Victim believed this to be urine initially. Both parties had a verbal argument later in the evening, and the victim has put their arm out towards the suspect. During this, suspect one has grabbed their arm and pushed victim back. Victim and their friends have left the locus. No visible injuries. Later, the complainant declined to prosecute. No further action was taken. Again, from reading that MO, it would appear that underage persons are being allowed to attend and drink alcohol at premises, leading to disorder. On the 2nd of December 2020, a vulnerable 17-year-old reported to West Yorkshire Police that they had been sexually assaulted on the 3rd of July 2020. During the video interview conducted by police officers, they disclosed that prior to the sexual assault, they had attended the Woodman Inn, Hartley Street. They claimed that they were taken there by a 15-year-old. Whilst in the Woodman Inn, both of them, the complainant and the 15-year-old friend, had consumed alcohol. The statement of PC 3368 Richard Terry, who assisted with the video interview, is attached to this file and can be produced as RT1. Police log 0848, 14:59 hours, Sunday 10th of January 2021. West Yorkshire Police received a call from an anonymous caller reporting that persons were in the pub watching the Leeds match. This had been extended to persons outside their bubble and it happens quite often. At this time, on the 10th of January 2021, all pubs in the UK were closed under the COVID-19 legislation, and persons from other households could not enter your home unless there was a specific reason, such as caring for a vulnerable person. PC 4528 Nigota and Acting Police Sergeant 6681 Holloway and PC 204 Satar attended at the Woodman Inn at 15:15 hours on the 10th of January 21. They found inside the pub 11 people present, 5 of whom did not live at the address. No persons were wearing PPE and no social distancing was in place. Attached is a statement of PC 4528 Nigota, Exhibit NN1. All persons present received COVID warnings. Body-worn footage from this visit has been placed onto a disc and can be produced as Exhibit KJJ2. I have viewed the body-worn footage and it shows the following. The lights were on in the bar area, the till was on, with the till roll pulled forward, and the sum of £3.30 was displayed on the till screen. The till drawer was shut. 2 empty Smirnoff ice bottles were on the bar. On one table, which 6 people are sat around, there is 1 pint glass 3/4 full of what looks to be lager, 2 empty pint glasses, 1 empty half pint glass, 2 bottles of beer, and 3 mugs. On the other table, where 2 people are sat, there are 3 pint glasses, 1 3/4 full, 1 1/4 full, and 1 of what looks like to be lager and 1 empty. There is also a person stood in the corner holding a pint glass which looks almost empty. It is not clear what liquid is inside. The DPS is drinking what looks like lager from a pint glass. When officers are leaving the bar, the body-worn footage captures that the bar font has got foam on it, and there is evidence that drinks have been dispensed as there is foam in the drip tray. It would appear from the footage that the drinks have been hand-pulled and charged for, with the till being on and displaying £3.30. When PC Nigota says to the DPS, "You are suffering because of this lockdown," the DPS replied, "We're suffering because of underhand, sneaky bastards." The above evidence documents that the licensee is allowing the sale and consumption of alcohol to under 18s in his premises, which is then leading to crime and disorder and the harm of children. He is putting profits before public safety and is more concerned over who reported the breach than the spread of COVID-19. West Yorkshire Police Licensing have tried to work with the licensee to address the issues, but the advice, officer support and warnings have been ignored. The DPS has allowed persons to enter the premises and be served drinks during the pandemic when all public houses are closed. The business is eligible to receive financial support from the government to stay closed. Therefore, we are requesting that strong consideration be given to removing the DPS of this premises. This is to prevent further crime and disorder occurring at the premises, for public safety and to protect children from harm. We also request that CCTV be added as a condition to the licence. No person related to the DPS in any way to be able to take over the role of DPS or be employed in any managerial position that impacts on the day-to-day running of the Woodman Public House. Since submitting this application, the solicitor, Robert Rackup, made contact with me and proposed possible enhanced conditions, which has been forwarded for this hearing. Myself and the licensing manager, Fiona Goldsmith, have looked at these conditions and have adapted them to a standard we would deem suitable if members are minded to just add conditions. I believe these emails have been sent on to yourselves. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Normally at this stage we would put questions to you, but we're moving on to item 7, which is about exclusion of the public. And as I indicated earlier on, it's in relation to West Yorkshire Police information containing exempt details as defined under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act, and therefore the public are to be excluded during this period for the information to be considered. Once the information has been presented to the panel, the hearing will then move back to the public session. So there will be a private session, which is purely to watch a video, and thereafter we will revert back to the public session, and it's likely to take approximately 25 minutes. So at this stage, we will move over to another room to enable us to watch the video which has been made available by West Yorkshire Police.
Chair.
Hello, afternoon again. So welcome back to the application for review under section 51 of the Licensing Act in relation to the Woodman Inn. We've now had an opportunity to view exempt information presented by the police, and we'll now move to any questions or opportunities for people to ask any questions. I have a few questions that I'd like to ask of the officer. PC Jagger, are you with us, PC Jagger?
Yes, I'm with you. Yes.
Lovely. Okay. So before we went into our private session, first of all, you clarified the date of the incident on the 15th of November rather than the 16th of November. And you talked about a Section 18 grievous bodily harm incident. And you also mentioned about the landlord's refusal to cooperate with the police. Could you, could you give us some more information about that? What would you have expected in those circumstances?
Well, I just took that information from what they call the OEL of the crime. Officers went on the night, approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, admittedly, and they said that the landlord, and they used those words, it wasn't helpful. But for reviewing it yesterday, I went through it yesterday, and the next day he did review his CCTV and look at it and tell the police that there was nothing on it, nothing of evidential value. But it was just a comment made by the police officers at 2 o'clock in the morning following the incident that they wrote on the crime.
Right, okay, so to clarify, the landlord was cooperative. The next day he contacted the police and provided some details.
That is correct, yes. Yeah, and later on they did get to view the CCTV footage.
That's really useful, thank you. The next question I wanted to ask about was the complainant who approached the police on the 2nd of December about a sexual assault on the 3rd of July.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, and I just wanted to really clarify that date because we're in a lockdown during that period, weren't we?
We were, yes, and obviously that was the day before we were allowed to open. I mean, obviously it was a complaint that came in sometime after the alleged incident. I was made aware of it by Richard Terry, who is a safeguarding officer, and he made us aware that this victim had made a complaint sometime after the incident, and in her evidence, she'd said she'd been drinking at the Woodman prior to the incident happening. I'm only surmising here that because of the time lapse from giving the statement and the incident happening, she may have got her dates confused. But
right.
Yes, but that was the date that Richard Terry has put on his statement.
So it may in fact be the 4th of July, not the 3rd of July.
Possibly, or it might have been sort of the week after when the pub would have been open. But yes.
Okay. Yeah, for me it was important to make that distinction. Okay. So the incident on the 10th of January, where the video that we've just seen, where the police entered the premises, I just wanted to ask about some specific details in relation to the till, for example. And the officer indicated that there was a till available. There was a till and there was a receipt roll which showed a payment of £3.30.
That is correct, yes. Unfortunately, you couldn't hear me on the footage. Well, yes, I couldn't give any commentary on that earlier on. But yes, the officers went in, and on the body-worn camera as they're walking behind the bar, if you look to the right on the body-worn camera, the till clearly says £3.30. The till roll is pulled forward, and the till drawer is shut. And as Richard Woodhead, my colleague, commented, who used to run a lot of pubs, if a pub is closed, the good practice, and what 99.9% of landlords do, is turn the till off and leave the till drawer open so that they're less susceptible to being burgled. So my thoughts on that are, why, when they've been closed for so long, was the till on and showing the £3.30?
That was my next question. Thank you for answering that. But the receipt itself, nobody took the time to have a look at the date on the receipt?
No.
Only the amount?
No, yes.
Oh. Okay.
And the amount was on the till screen, that the customer would see from a distance.
Okay, thank you. Just one other question. Around that time, around the 10th of January, do you have any idea what the death rate was in the UK for COVID-19?
I don't, but I do know at that time, it was very high and people were very worried at that time, and that what made this even more shocking. And the police were getting called to a high number of concerned people who were reporting such incidents.
You're right. During the footage, I did sort of have a quick look at what the rate was, and it was over 1,000 people a day at that time.
Yeah.
So I think it was important for me to have a look at that, of course, in the context of what we've been dealing with. But those are all the questions from me for now. Thank you very much. Councillor Homewood, have you got any questions?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. So the first one is just in terms of the incidents over time that have happened at this premise. I know that in this report, the first one seems to be sort of November 2019 that's being referred to here. So I'm just trying to understand, looking at obviously the documentation, there's been a license in place for some time, and I believe it's the same license holder. So do we have any view on, was there any incidents before that? Have the issue started from 2019? I'm just trying to understand whether there's a longer history of issues or whether it is just that time period.
It is just that time period, and like I said in my report, it was brought to our attention from the local officers that there'd been this incident where somebody at 16 had the jaw broken, and that officers believed underage drinking was taking place there. But prior to that, no, it hadn't been on our radar, and like you say, I'd been there quite some time at the Landlord.
Mm-hmm. And just in terms of the age of the users or the patrons, because I mean, there is obviously a number of bits of evidence in there that say, people were ID'd and they were 17, and there is a mention obviously around some people younger than that who were involved in incidents, and obviously not 100% clear whether they were drinking in the pub or not. But obviously there is also quite a lot of references in there to we had a look and they looked underage. I'm just trying to ascertain, how many instances do we actually know where there are underage drinkers in that pub as opposed to just assumed, because actually on a lot of occasions it looks like the people in there were 17, and it must be quite difficult just from looking to tell whether somebody's 17 or 18. So do we know how many instances there are where we've actually ascertained that somebody under the age of 18 was drinking at that pub in any of these incidents?
Where we can prove it is obviously the incident where the 16-year-old had the jaw broken, because he was 16 and the 3 witnesses were 17, and I do know the 16-year-old admitted to having drunk at the pub. And the licensing visit, that's another definite, because I was there and the 17-year-old admitted to me that he had been drinking. 3 girls walked past me who were 16. They didn't have anything in their hand, but they were coming out of the main bar and going outside.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then just the final one, just in terms of the COVID restrictions, I just wondered if you could potentially give us a bit of a picture about the number of incidents we've seen across Kirklees in terms of these sorts of issues. I appreciate there's obviously a cumulative question in this case, but I'm just trying to understand, have we actually seen quite a lot of these incidents, and what would be the usual process? So would the police, where there's been a breach on a one-off occasion, would the police be asking the council to review the license at those individual, or is this additional evidence, I guess, that's come together with the previous issues that are at this premise?
We have had a few calls. We've had a lot of calls about pubs, sort of people believing that they're open, but quite often it's been sort of people that live in the pubs using the area as their own. We haven't had any proven breaches like this. No, we haven't. But if I'm honest, if this had been a one-off incident, I would have probably spoke to the manager about giving this licensee, this DPS, a warning letter. But because I'm so concerned about this pub and the underage drinking and the work we've done with it and the COVID breaches, I just think it's time that, it's looked at closer by the members, to be honest, So I feel there's issues at this pub that need looking at a higher level than mine.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. That's all my questions, Chair.
Councillor Watson, have you got any questions? Is Are you with us, Councillor Watson?
I think he might have had some connection issues, Chair, because he's come on and off a couple of times.
Right, okay. Well, we can always go back to Councillor Watson. I just have one more question, actually, PC Jagger.
Yes.
When you went to the premises on the 10th of January, you issued warnings. Who were those warnings to, and what were those warnings about, please?
The 10th of January, which was the day of the COVID breach, wasn't it? They were COVID warnings that the police issue, and they were for all the people at the pub that did not live there. That is the sort of first step that police officers give a warning, and a number of people within West Yorkshire have been giving them. If people persistently get warnings, then they would go into a fixed penalty. But it's down to the officer's discretion on the day.
That's useful, thank you. I still don't think Councillor Watson's with us.
No, I'm here now. I'd had to turn off the video because it was breaking up.
Lovely. Councillor Watson, have you got any questions?
I don't know if you covered these whilst it was breaking up, but I'll ask them anyway. It seemed to me that there were within the reports a couple of specific examples of evidence where it is stated that 17-year-olds had been drinking. It doesn't say whether they purchased alcohol. Is there any information that I've missed on that, or is there anything else that the police can add on that?
No, you're right there. We can't prove that they've purchased it there, but what I would say is there's no reason to believe they hadn't purchased it from there. They've been using the facilities there. It wasn't like they were drinking outside, sort of in the drinking area outside and bringing their own cans. And that's why we need a strict identification policy, because, you know, yes, somebody 17 can go with a friend who's 19, and the friend 19 can potentially buy it for that 17-year-old. But, you know, these laws are there for a reason, to protect these 17, 16-year-olds, aren't they? So, no, there's no evidence to say they purchased it, but there's no evidence to say they brought it with them either.
Thank you. And in relation specifically to the incident on the 2nd of December 2020, where the vulnerable 17-year-old made the report, it says there that it was claimed that they were taken there by a 15-year-old, and whilst in the Woodman Inn, the 15-year-old and the victim had consumed alcohol. So was that a clear, unequivocal statement by the 17-year-old that both the 17-year-old and the 15-year-old had consumed alcohol in these premises?
Yes, it was, and it was given during a video interview to the officers for the sexual assault. So that's the background of it. So we've just taken that at face value because they weren't pressed to say what they've been doing beforehand. They were just asked to give a run up to the sexual assault, and that's what was said in the video interview given by a specialist officer.
Thank you for clarifying that.
No more questions? Okay.
No, nothing further.
Lovely. The licensing officer, do you have any questions for the police?
Chair, I've had a look at the question that you asked earlier about the children from harm. There's no conditions on the licence for that, so that application was made in 2005. That's
useful to know. I think the police clarified later on that they agreed some conditions on the licence to, I think it was 7:30.
On this current licence that I've presented, that is all I've got, Chair.
That's useful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, those are conditions were just an action plan we tried to put in place. So there weren't conditions, they were just like an action plan really for 6 weeks.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, so representatives now to ask questions of the police. Shall I start with Mr. Brackett being the legal representative?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. PC Jagger, can you tell me, you've spoken a bit about children drinking alcohol in the public house, but is there any direct evidence of children under the age of 18 actually purchasing alcohol in the public house?
Like I've just said, no, there's no evidence of them purchasing it. But like sort of the complainant who was 16, who had his jaw broken, he said, I'd been to the Woodman, we'd had a few drinks. But no evidence.
Yes, but the distinction. Sorry, the reason why I asked the question is: would you agree, and is it within your experience, that underage people may go into a public house and have their own alcohol with them?
That's not my experience that they can bring their own alcohol.
I'm not saying it's permitted. I'm saying that it's a practice that happens.
Possibly, yes. Yeah,
your
people under
experience?
18. Yes, people under 18 can smuggle alcohol in, can't they? And that's why we sort of adhere to a strict search policy for places that attract people of a certain age.
Yes, I understand that, but there is a clear distinction, is there not, between people purchasing alcohol in the public house and underage people smuggling alcohol into the public house?
Yes, I accept that. Yep.
Yes. And do you have experience of under 18-year-olds producing faked ID in order to get served in pubs?
We do, and we get a lot of fake ID given to us by SIA registered door staff who take it off people. I mean, a trained eye can tell the difference between a fake ID and a proper one, like a provisional driving license. I mean, anybody can go online and order fake ID online, but the trained eye, and it doesn't have to be that well trained, can really tell a difference. And that's why we say only accept provisional driving licenses, passports, or the pass cards that are authorised and put in place for teenagers, 18, 19-year-olds that don't want to take the passport or driving licence out.
Yes, but the point is, it's a feature of modern life, isn't it, that young people under the age of 18 frequently produce either ID that isn't their own or ID that is faked in order to try and obtain service in public houses.
They do try to, yes, that's true.
Yeah, and that's a common occurrence.
I wouldn't say it's a common occurrence. I think places with a very strict door policy, under 18s know not to go there because they will have the ID taken off them and they'll be refused entry. So I wouldn't say it's a common occurrence at all.
Okay, so in terms of the incident on the 15th of November 2019, did your inquiries reveal as to whether or not the complainant and defendant in that incident were asked to produce ID or not?
No, we didn't ask that question. No. In fact, I didn't see the complainant because he was in hospital. But the complainant did say to me that he went to Kirklees College, and that was a place at Kirklees College where they knew they could go and drink, and it was sort of their meeting place.
You're telling me things now that have not been disclosed in Appendix A, so that's very difficult for me to deal with and to take instructions on. So I'm just asking you about the points that you've made in your application. If you could confine it to that, that would be helpful.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Sorry?
Oh, yes, the question was no, they weren't asked. No, they weren't asked whether they took fake ID or they were identified.
No, so we don't know, as we are here now, whether they were ID'd and produced some fake ID or otherwise. We just don't know that, do we?
No.
No. And this suggestion that Mr. Fulston was uncooperative, you've seen, I'm sure, the points made on behalf of the license holder, the reason why he was equivocal with the police on that occasion was because he was thought to be directly involved in that assault. Isn't that right?
He was at yes, when the initial log came in, yes, an allegation was made against him. Yes, that is correct, but that's not in the hearing notes, is it? So I possibly can't reference that.
Well, it's in the response to the hearing notes, which we've prepared and submitted, and which you've had a copy of. And doesn't that rather explain an initial uncooperative attitude if he was being suspected of doing something that he hadn't done?
Perhaps. I mean, the allegation was that he had a baseball bat. So that's why the police were sort of treating him with suspicion, and the person that phoned it in said he had a baseball bat.
Yes. Well, it's right, isn't it, that if he'd have been found in possession of a baseball bat, he would have been arrested, because that's a criminal offence, is it not?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yes. And immediately he was removed from suspicion. He was entirely cooperative with the police and handed over the CCTV. That's right, isn't it?
He did supply the CCTV to the police, yes.
Thank you. In terms of the incident on the 24th of December, that was the Christmas Eve 2019, that all happened outside the public house, didn't it?
Yes, it did, yes.
And in fact, the call to the police came from a lady who was a friend of the DPS from within the public house.
Yes, that is correct.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no evidence on the 24th of December 19 that there was any unlawful activity ongoing in the public house.
Not in the public house, but directly outside.
Thank you. And can I take you to this very serious allegation that was raised sometime after the event of this on the 2nd of December?
Yes, certainly.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you were asked by the chair, I think, about the complainant getting the date wrong.
Yes.
And what you said was you surmised it possibly got the date wrong, and it could mean the 4th of July, or it could mean some other date in July. But the reality is that that's just you surmising. You don't know, do you?
No, I don't know, because it was just what was said in the statement from Richard Terry. So I wasn't there at that interview, and I didn't interview the female.
No, and I appreciate that memories can play tricks, but we have to deal with it on the basis of the report as presented, don't we? And do you accept the pub was closed on the 3rd of July?
Yes, pubs were closed. They reopened on the 4th, didn't they?
Yes. Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brackup. I should have actually clarified who it was who you're representing, whether it's the DPS or the brewery or both. Could you just clarify the position for me?
Yeah. Well, I'm instructed by the brewery, but there's an interest between the brewery and the DPS, and I've been asked to look after both interests as they're not felt to be conflicting.
Indeed. So in terms of questions being put to the police, are you addressing those questions on behalf of the clients you represent?
Sorry, can't quite hear that.
So I was asking whether, because obviously what I want to know is who, will be asking questions of the police, for example. So if you're representing the brewery and the DPS, then are you asking all the questions on behalf of both parties?
I am.
Yes. So there's no reason for me to go to the DPS or the brewery. You've asked all the questions that they're likely to ask, of the police.
Yes, but having prompted me, I do have one more question for the police officer. I'm terribly sorry.
That's fine. Ask your question.
Yeah, it relates to the accepted COVID breach on the 10th. And what I'm concerned about, Officer Jagger, is to distinguish between your belief and what is in fact evidence, because there is no evidence that there was a commercial sale of alcohol on the 10th of January, is there?
Well, I would just say that the evidence I would put, which I have put forward, is that the till was on and there was £3.30 rung up on it. If, you know, the pub had been shut for some time and it was just a social gathering, why is the till on?
Yes, but what you're doing is you're giving your opinion, aren't you? You're not presenting that as a proven fact. You're giving your interpretation of a circumstance, aren't you?
Well, it is a proven fact because the body-worn footage showed that the till was on and £3.30 was rung up. I'm just putting the facts to the members for them to decide.
Yes, but no one's disputing that there was a till roll and that figure was being displayed on the till. But that could have been from 6 months ago, couldn't it?
Possibly. Would you leave your till on for 6 months during lockdown?
Well, it's not for me to say what I would do. The fact is that in itself is not evidence of the commercial dispensing of drinks, is it?
Well, I would say it was, but that's my opinion.
Okay. Thank you. I can confirm no further questions.
Thank you. Okay. So moving on to the environmental health, do you have any questions for PC Jagger?
No questions, thank you.
Lovely. Okay. So we'll move on to the representative for the premises then, Mr. Brackup. If you can, you've got the floor now.
Yes. Thanks very much. I don't know if members have had the chance of considering the representations made that were put in writing.
Yes, I have.
Yes, I've read those, yep.
Yeah, I have.
I think that what I should say at the outset, I don't want to repeat everything that's set out in there because that seems unnecessary, but I'm happy to answer any questions. But I'd just like to make a few remarks. I'm very grateful to the member who asked about the history of the public house. And as those representations make clear, for just about 17 years now, the DPS has been in place there, either as manager or self-employed. And for 15 and a half or so of those years, there's an unblemished record. I also want to make it clear that the brewery and the DPS accept that on the face of it, issues have arisen which justify the review application being made by the police. And we're not going to try and undermine the points made to the point where they should be ignored. But what we do say is that we are in some difficulty when many of the suggestions appear to be predicated on opinion rather than fact, and even acknowledging that we're not in a court of law, there is a difference between opinion and fact, and the questioning to the officer was designed to illustrate that. What we also want to do is approach directly the COVID breach on the 10th of January. There is no excuse made by the DPS for what is an unacceptable breach, which it is accepted places others at risk, however willing they were to attend the public house. I think to understand that breach and to also understand perhaps why some incidents have arisen over the last 15 months, the panel should be aware of the nature of this public house, which is a community public house. And the COVID breach arises from, in a sense, a misguided sense of community in offering a forum for people who are patrons of the public house, albeit limited in number, to attend to watch the football match. Of the people there, half a dozen were direct members of the DPS and his family, and consequently, to put it into perspective, there were 5 people who shouldn't have been there, and of those 5, 3 were drinking non-alcoholic drinks, as the officer indicated by reference to the 3 mugs. So it's inexcusable, it's unjustifiable, it is accepted as being such, and the penalty was paid immediately within the time frames. That is not to say, however, that an inference can be drawn from that behaviour of one of general failure to adhere to the rules, or an inclination not to observe the terms of the licence, because in all other respects, both the brewery and the DPS maintain that they have done, and we treat with some degree of circumspection the suggestions that there is any widespread practice of dispensing alcohol to people under the age of 18. And in fact, it seems that as we've discussed these issues, there is no direct evidence of under 18s having purchased alcohol in the pub. But we recognise the concerns, and we recognise those concerns as being genuine. And that is why I approached PC Jagger with a view to seeing whether additional measures and conditions to the licence would be deemed to be acceptable to West Yorkshire Police. And you've seen that email correspondence and PC Jagger's email to me of the 23rd of February. And what both the brewery and the DPS hope is that the committee will feel that if those measures are introduced and imposed as conditions on the licence, that the committee will feel able to maintain the current arrangements with those conditions, in the knowledge and with the comfort that for 15 and a half years, the public house was run by the same people without breach. Those are the remarks we wish to make at this point.
Thank you. Is that the end of your submissions?
It is.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions? I don't have any questions.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Mr. Brackup, I appreciate you might not be able to answer this, but in terms of the comments that you made to the police officer just around the events, and I think that if I could understand the kind of main theme you were explaining was that some of these incidents that are potentially being linked to the public house were not necessarily related or were taking place outside and so on. I just wondered whether you or the DPS kind of has some understanding about why these issues have been taking place since 2019. So is there something going on, in the area that's leading to that happening, or some sort of it? I'm just trying to understand whether we've got some other evidence that kind of explains what the issue is that isn't linking it to the premise itself.
Yes, well, we can't comment, we can't explain an event of the type described on Christmas Eve, because if you look at the way in which that's described, it refers to very substantial numbers of people, and there's no suggestion that those people themselves were in the public house.
Yeah.
What the DPS indicated was that they'd been turned away from or had come from another public house, and their behaviour was caused because they were actually refused entry to the Woodman. And what we say about that is we can't be accountable for that scale of trouble involving that number of people. That's a wider public disorder issue and not directly associated with any failures on the part of the Woodman. But I've asked the DPS about the issue of underage persons coming into the pub and why, for the vast majority of his time there has been no issue. And he attributes it to people of long-standing who frequent the pub asking to hire the premises to hold 18th birthday parties for their children. And he thinks that in some ways there has been a connection between those private events and a misunderstanding from youth in the locality that meant that they would be allowed access to the pub and that has been abused. The practice of having those parties has now stopped, well, as part of a conscious effort to address those issues.
Okay.
I'm not sure it helps.
Yeah, no, that does help. And then the other thing I just wanted to ask was just in relation to what you said about the COVID breach, because my reading of the police report and then some of the other documentation was that actually what the explanation of that was that it was a private kind of family affair, if you like, in relation to the son's birthday where some close friends had been invited. And so I took from that it was more of a kind of personal gathering, and the principle was that it's because it's their home address, and so they'd invited friends round to watch the football and drink because it was the son's birthday. In the submission that you said, it sounded to me a little bit like they kind of did open the pub. You know, it was a community event where they thought it was justified to open the pub, you know, because to help the community or something. That would then suggest to me that would have been on the basis of, you know, trading essentially and selling alcohol. Can you just clarify that, what you're actually saying in terms of what happened on that day?
Well, it certainly wasn't a community event whereby the doors were open to the community. Your initial understanding of it is correct, which was why I was keen to dispel the notion that alcohol had been dispensed on a commercial basis.
Okay, so you're saying
there were 11. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So your kind of submission is that it was you know, a private event with close friends, and the alcohol wasn't being sold. It was you know, being laid on essentially for friends.
Yes, absolutely right. I think there were 11 people there, 6 direct members of the family, and 1 employee who, as you heard on the footage, had actually been working and cleaning out the pipes.
Okay, that clears it up. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Watson.
Yes, just a couple of points for Mr. Bracker. And before I make them, what I would say is I suspect that you're probably not sat with your client. I don't know, with your clients. If you're not, and you're not able to answer these questions, then please don't feel the need to try and deal with them. It may be that those parties want to come in and comment themselves. But there's just a couple of points. The first is turning to the meeting on the 21st of November with the officers, at which Richard Woodhead was present. one of the points that came up for discussion there was underage, children entering the premises. And looking at the notes from the police officer, what it says there is that essentially, as I understand it, what happens is that the premises supervisor stands at the front door, but did accept that it had been known for children to get in via the rear door, which was whilst he was stood on the front door, and therefore the rear door wasn't covered. There was a recommendation made that SIA registered staff be retained to cover the back door effectively, I think. But the DPS said that he would deal with the situation himself. I'm not quite sure what that deal with the situation himself means, but looking at later on in the report, where it talks about on the 24th of January that there were people in there of which on checking IDs, and there's no suggestion here that when the police checked these IDs they thought they were false. I think if they were false, I would hope they would have picked that up. But when they actually did an ID check, there was one who was 17 who actually admitted to having drunk alcohol, and there were 3 others who were all 16 years who looked to be in drink. Now, you might say that is an expression of opinion and not fact, but certainly admission of the 17-year-old having drunk alcohol seems fairly conclusive. So what we seem to have is a situation whereby the issue is raised with the DPS on the 19th of November. Some months later, there's another inspection carried out. The place has underage people who are actually drinking, and therefore, whatever it was that the DPS said he was going to do to deal with the situation himself doesn't appear to have worked. What I'm interested in is what did he do after that meeting in November that changed the situation?
He locked the rear doors in order to deal directly with any suggestion that people were coming in through those doors, and anybody wanting to access the rear of the premises would have to go out of the front of the pub and round the back. He also enlisted assistance from one of his sons to help on the door.
Thank you. Does he accept, therefore, that on the 20th of January, or 24th of January, sorry, when that inspection took place, there was a 17-year-old on the premises who produced valid ID to the police and who admitted they had been drinking?
Well, I can't directly answer that, I'm afraid, because I'm not at all sure that the visit on the 24th of January suggests that alcohol had been purchased by a 17-year-old. I'm looking at Appendix A. Police licensing visit on the 24th of January. I attended in full uniform. In the side room where the pool table is situated was approximately 25 people, all who looked to be under 21. On checking their IDs, 4 of the people present were found to be under 18. One who was 17 admitted to having drunk alcohol. I can't see that there is an admission that alcohol was purchased by that person and drunk by that person in the pub. The admission is to having drunk alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. I get that, and that was why I asked the earlier question right back at the start about purchasing alcohol, because I couldn't see anything in here either about purchasing. But of course, the fact is that my question really was: does the DPS accept that there was a 17-year-old in there with ID who had been drinking alcohol? It doesn't say, the statement there says had drunk alcohol. It doesn't say that was in the premises, though, to be fair, that seems to be the implication. Does the DPS accept effectively that this one slipped through the net?
It depends what you mean by slip through the net, I'm afraid. If you're asking, does he accept that 17-year-old purchased and drank the alcohol that had been purchased in the public house, then the answer is no. If the question is, does the DPS accept that there was a 17-year-old in the pub who had taken alcohol? Then the answer is yes.
Thanks very much. Those were all the questions I had. Thank you.
I'm going to just really, I know we're going to cover it with environmental health, but I just wanted to kind of highlight the letter that was sent from environmental health on the 3rd of November about the breach of the COVID rules, where they visited on the 30th of October and found that the premises, the DPS wasn't exercising the rules around COVID-19 in terms of encouraging social distancing, wearing masks, and that sort of thing sat separately. But in your email to the council, you don't allude to that. But that is, that's something that should be considered as part of, suggestions put forward in how to resolve this issue. I just wondered whether you wanted to make a comment on that.
Sorry, that's directed to me?
It is, yes.
Sorry, what we've submitted to you as part of our documentation a COVID-19 checklist. I don't know if you've had.
Is that at the back?
See that?
Yeah.
It is. It's attached to the back.
Yeah.
My understanding, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, is that this is a document produced by the brewery and represents a best practice. And my understanding is that those measures as set out on that checklist for the hospitality business is being complied with, and that should be read in conjunction with the track and trace documents also submitted. I think it's right also to say that COVID measures are part of a learning process that we're all getting to grips with. But guidance has been given to the DPS by the brewery, and so far as I'm aware, that guidance is being complied with.
Okay, I mean, we're yet to hear from environmental health, so they can go into obviously a lot more detail about their visit on the 30th of October, but it does raise some concerns as far as I'm concerned. But I think it's important to hear from them anyway, so I'll leave it there. Maybe I'll put my questions to them. I think it's the environmental health next, isn't it, to ask questions if they have any.
Could I just ask when the guidance was issued by the brewery to the DPS, please, regarding COVID measures?
Simon, are you able to answer that?
Sorry, I missed the question. Was it a case of when was it introduced?
Yeah, when was it issued to the DPS?
Yeah. All our pubs had the risk assessment introduced prior to the reopening in July. Each outlet got a full pack of the COVID, the one-way signs, the track and trace. Eventually, the barcode came into effect, as you'll know. So there was a full package there.
Thank you.
Any more questions from environmental health?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Not at this stage. Okay. So moving on then to the responsible authority, which is the environmental health.
Hello there, it's Jenny speaking. I just want to reiterate something that Mr. Brackup and PC Jagger have both stated, in that the visit on the 10th of January of this year by the police was during the period of national lockdown that we're still under. And as we're all aware, that was introduced because of increasing rates of infection and the discovery of the new variant of the coronavirus. So at that time, all pubs and hospitality industry, close contact services, etc., were supposed to be closed. And I thank Mr. Brackup for accepting that there was a clear breach on that particular day and informing us that the penalty was paid. I think that was on the 15th February. The reason I asked the brewery when the information was provided to the DPS regarding COVID controls was because obviously we visited on the 30th of October, which was after July, when the bundle of information was provided to the DPS. As a result of which we sent an advisory letter on the date of the 3rd of November to the DPS regarding controls that needed to be tightened up. I wasn't actually the officer who visited the premises, but my colleague Andrew Simnett is on the call and he did visit. So if you don't mind, Chair, I'd like to hand over to Andrew so he can describe the measures he saw and the concerns he had. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, are you with us?
Sorry about that, I was on mute. Yes, reintroduce myself. I'm Andrew Simnett. I'm an environmental health officer. I was working on the night of the 30th of October with my colleague Leon Oates. We'd visited quite a number of premises in the Batley area, carrying out advisory visits and dealing with whatever contraventions we might have observed, taking notes and subsequently sending advisory letters. My colleague, on this particular occasion, my colleague Leon Oates, it was he who drafted the letter that summarised our observations on the night. So what I propose is just to very quickly go through what he summarised in his letter as the observed contraventions, and then go through the notes that I have in my own notebook. So Leon noted in a letter sent the 3rd of November to the Woodman Inn, the system for recording customer details was not being implemented successfully. Customers were free to enter the premises and approach the bar without wearing a face covering. Customers were moving around the premises without a face covering. Groups of customers from different households were socially sat together. Customers were stood at the bar with drinks. Customers were socially interacting with other tables, and this was not being challenged by staff. Music was being played at a volume that necessitated the raising of voices. So on those points, at that time, the guidance has changed and it has varied over this period. But at that time, table service was meant to be in place by anybody running a pub. And obviously the details about customers moving around and standing at the bar is indicating that table service was not in place. Moving on to my own notes. On entering, I noticed that 2 customers came back from the WC not wearing masks. 1 customer stopped and picked up his pint from the bar. The front door had a notice on it, entry only, but I didn't observe that on my own entry. It had to be pointed out to me. On entry, we introduced ourselves. I asked the man who identified himself as John, who I assume is Mr. Fulstrom, is there access to, is there a garden area, is there a smoking area outside? And he indicated to me that it was a rear garden. So I left via the front door and went around to the rear garden. There were a number of people sat at tables out there. I observed a number of people leaving those tables to go and get served, well, to move into the inside, and my assumption is that they were going to get more beer. Then I accessed, well, entered through the back door. I'd not been to this pub before, so I wasn't familiar with its layout. So on entry through the front door, it seems like a very quiet, nice, or decent back street pub. On entry through the rear door, I suddenly came across a rear room that was quite large and full of young people. There was one man stood at the bar drinking there. Whilst I watched, there were people mixing between tables. My own observation would be that the majority of those people were very young, well, very young in that they were round about 18. I wouldn't be able to say exactly. And then my final note is, as we left, John asked me what he had to be concerned about, what he had to worry about. I discussed that with him and said that, well, there were a number of matters that would be raised in a letter that was going to be sent to him. To summarise, really, at that time, lack of stable service, not wearing masks, close proximity between people, no 2 meter distancing at all, and that would be about it, really. Yeah. Well, sorry, there was one thing I just noted during the course of listening to the conversations that have been taking place this afternoon. In moving round to the back garden and then entering the premises through the rear door, I could observe nobody in any control at the rear door.
Okay. Is that the end of your submissions?
Those are my observations, yes.
Okay. So I have one question, and it's in relation to an email from Andrew Robinson, which is dated the 20th of January, which is attached to the bundle. And it says at the end that it was noted the attitude of the DPS was that they're closing anyway, so they didn't seem to care about the rules in place. Now, you were there, weren't you, on the 30th of October? Is that your recollection?
Right. I did not make a note of that. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Yeah. No, I did not make a note of that in my notebook. But if you're asking what my recollection is, it was clear that it was their last weekend. It was going to be the 1st of November, I think, was going to be the last day of drinking before the pubs were shut. And they said, we're closing anyway. They did say that, yes.
Okay. All right. And the letter that you sent out on the 3rd of November, listing what the council's concerns were, did you receive a response to that letter?
I can't reply to that. I don't know, to be honest with you. I work in if I just point out, I work in the food team. I was drafted in to do the COVID visit, so someone else may be able to answer that. Yeah.
Is your colleague able to respond?
Yeah, so that's Andrew Robinson on the line. Yes, it was myself and my colleague Leon Oates that visited and hand-delivered it to Mr. Falston. So it was given to him by hand.
Was there any response?
I can't remember exact wordings, but they didn't seem happy with us being there. But I wouldn't be able to clarify exact wording that was said.
Okay. So I'll move to my colleagues now. Councillor Homewood, have you got any questions?
Just a couple of quick things. So this obviously visit took place on the 30th of October. I just wondered whether that was the first and only time that you visited the premises during this period, and whether or whether you had any other sort of complaints or anything about this premises not following any kind of rules, or whether it was just this one occasion. And just linked to that, I'd just be helpful. Obviously, you've called out what the issues were. It'd just be helpful if you could clarify whether actually there was any COVID measures put in place at all. It sounds like from what you've said that there wasn't really, but I'm just wondering whether, what was the issue? Was it that some measures had been put in place, not followed properly, the fact that people using the pub just weren't following the guidance that was there, or it was just kind of a total lack of any sort of measures whatsoever?
I'll read you some notes from my notebook. As we left, John asked what he had to worry about. I discussed a sign on the bar which said, in inverted commas, only 2. That was a sign on the bar. It was a sign that was meant for the toilet door. And that summarised might summarise the implementation of any relevant precautions.
But to clarify, for example, you said system of recording customer details was not being implemented successfully. So do you mean by that there was a process for recording customer details what does that mean it wasn't successful? So were they just not asking people to fill it in, or was it just left up to individuals to fill it in? And just trying to understand what the level of kind of rules being followed was.
I'll just, if I could just explain how we worked that evening. We worked as a pair and going out with the police also. And between Leon and myself, we divided up the work. Leon this basically was Leon's job, in which he was going to write the letter. That note is Leon's note, not my own, and I can't comment on that. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's kind
but
of.
What I will say is that on entry there was no challenge. On entry, I could observe no book in which I could enter my name, and on entry there was nobody was discussing with me, about taking any details. Yes.
And just to do the thing, that was the only visit that you made that's been made to that premises. Is that correct?
That's the only visit I have made. As my colleague Andrew Robinson has said, he delivered a letter. I'm not sure whether any other visits have been made.
Okay.
I can confirm that no further visits have been made to that premises.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just jump back in there? So when was the letter delivered?
On the letter, the date is the 3rd of November. Mr. Robinson might be able to tell you the date of delivery. He hand delivered it.
Because what I'm interested in is, on the day of delivery, what did you see?
So on the day of delivery, what I saw was just the DPS and I believe his partner. They were the only people in the pub at the time. But the door was open, so potentially anybody could attend, come into the pub, and they weren't wearing masks at that point. Obviously, if no one else is there, then there's no need to. But if somebody can just walk into the premises at that point, as we did, I would expect them to be able to put a mask on to keep, maintain that, safe practice.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, any questions?
Yes, just one. When you went on Friday 30th of October at 9 o'clock in the evening, was the back door locked?
No.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions from the licensing officer?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Brackup?
No, I have no questions.
Okay. Right, okay, so it looks like we've come to an end in terms of questions and comments. I would only ask everyone now at this stage to round up. If there's anything specific that you want to say at this stage as closing comments, please do so. So the licensing officer, have you got anything you want to say to sum up?
So, Chair, there's not much that I want to say, but I will say, when you asked me the question about the children, that application was made in 2005, but when the police went, they set some recommendations, so those wouldn't have been put on the licence.
Thank you. Environmental health, would you like to sum up?
All I would say in summary is premises, when they reopen, would be expected to be a COVID secure premises, in that they should adhere to all the controls listed in the working safely guidance issued by the government. And I think clearly on the 30th of October, the premises weren't fully compliant in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brackup, would you like to sum up and conclude?
I have very little to add to what's set out in the document in writing, other than to say it's highly accepted that on reopening, the public house needs to be compliant with all COVID measures. That's accepted both by the brewery and the DPS.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending. Myself and my two colleagues will now go away and consider the information that's been presented today. We will not deliver the results via webcast. Instead, a letter will be sent out to the applicant, will be sent out to the premises holder to confirm the decision that's been made by myself and my colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Today we've considered the application for review of hearing under Section 51 of the Licensing Act 2003 in respect of the Woodman Inn. We've had an opportunity to listen to all the information and evidence presented by everyone concerned in this matter. And as a panel, we've now made a decision on where we want this issue, how we want this issue to be dealt with. We're concerned about the repeated incidents of underage drinking at the premises and the lack of observation of the COVID-19 restrictions as outlined in the application. This suggests a relaxed and cavalier attitude towards the law in respect of this premises and how it should operate. And in the circumstances, we feel for the licence to continue to operate, additional measures would need to be imposed. We've reviewed the conditions set by Mr. Brackup for the premises holder and the licence, and also, in addition to that, the proposals made by the police. We've decided to follow the recommendations made by the police. That decision will be put in writing for the licence holder, so you'll be aware of what those conditions are. In addition, we expect the licensing service and relevant council departments to continue to monitor these premises on a regular basis to ensure that they continue to adhere to the conditions that have been set. Thank you everyone for attending today and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Cheerio.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.